Capes on the Couch podcast is for entertainment purposes only. Dr. Issues is a psychiatrist, but he is not your psychiatrist and does not have knowledge of your individual situation. For any personal mental health concerns, please consult your own healthcare providers. For medical emergencies, please call 911 or the designated number in your area immediately. Remember that you are not alone and help is out there.
Hello and welcome to Capes on the Couch, where comics get counseling. I'm Anthony Sitko.
And I'm Dr. Issues.
This is issue number 33. Thank you so much for sticking around with us through 33 episodes. We're a third of the way to 100, which is just, my mind has been blown.
Yeah. Technically, we're 33%, which is a little under a third, so...
In about 15 minutes, we'll officially be, 20 minutes, we'll be officially at a third of the way through 100 episodes. Wow, and I thought I was pedantic and nitpicky.
Well, you are when it comes to the audio levels, but
Well played, well played. So I hope you had an opportunity to listen to last week's episode, a very, very fun crossover with Popcorn Psychology. And this past Monday, they just released their half of our crossover episode talking about the Incredible Hulk film with Edward Norton. So please give that a listen to, and you can hear us actually swear uncensored.
That's right. I get to point out that they didn't use Doc Samson enough.
Yes, you did, because you definitely love mentioning all things Doc Samson.
I believe when we first started thinking of titles for this podcast, I may have mentioned to you, or if I didn't, one of my names was Doc Samson is Always Right.
Yes, you did mention that. So anyway, give a listen to that one. Like I said, our friends over at Popcorn Psychology, Ben, Hannah, and Brittany, very, very gracious hosts, and we will definitely be doing another episode with them again in the future. Also, another podcast, while we're on the subject, I guess we'll start doing this at the beginning of every episode, giving little shout outs to other podcasts that we like, that we listen to. Considered and Conceited is an Australian film review podcast. They are very, very entertaining, hilarious to hear just the Aussie slang, because they are so authentically Aussie, that just the terms that they use, and they think that we are right crackers. Well, maybe me. More so than you.
Yeah, that has so many different meanings, which is very common with the Australian / British / American versions of English. I love
Yes, we're all separated by a common language.
Yeah.
Especially the English. Some of the headlines and things that I see out of newspapers, I'm convinced that the English may have created the language, but they no longer speak it.
It's interesting because the other theory is that we, as isolated Americans, since we left that region, we didn't develop, and they were speaking like this a long time ago, and they're the ones who have matured. So, just another thought.
Well, as an American, I say that's wrong.
That sounds like something an American would say.
Hell yeah. So Considered and Conceited, they are definitely a very entertaining podcast. And I guess in the scope of giving a recommendation, we encourage our listeners to give them a listen. They're a little free with the language, so just to be warned about that. But otherwise, a very entertaining show. You know, they gave us a shout out a couple of weeks ago, and we would certainly like to return the favor. So thank you very much. Give them a listen to. I don't know all of the platforms that you can find them on, but you can find us on Google Play, iTunes, Stitcher, TuneIn, YouTube, iHeartRadio, and Spotify. You can also check out our Patreon page, patreon.com/Capes on the Couch, if you want to hear more of the uncensored swearing. So if you want to hear me say things like, well, holy fucking shit, that was amazing, and not have it bleeped, you can check out our Patreon and subscribe for, I believe that's at least the $5 level, will get you the uncensored material. But the $3 gets you early access. We'll get you the bloopers. We got a lot of bloopers, a lot of things that we say, a lot of mess ups that we make during the recording of the show. And that all gets put together into a monthly blooper reel. So this week's episode is all about one Wilson Fisk, aka the Kingpin. And it is fortuitous in a timing perspective, not only because he is being portrayed by Liev Schreiber in the Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse film, which comes out this week, which I definitely want to see. It looks absolutely amazing. From the first trailer,
I want to
caught
see
my
it.
eye.
My daughter wants to see it. She's basically demanding that we see it, actually. So, like, oh, I have to go with my daughter to make her happy. Yes.
Yeah, unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to catch it this weekend because I'm going to be away on vacation, mini vacation for my brother-in-law's bachelor party. So I will not be able to see it this weekend, but I will definitely see it at some point with my wife. Unfortunately, just with life and everything, it gets difficult to see the movie sometimes. I'm sure you, as a father, can understand and appreciate that. I don't even have a kid yet. I mean, my wife is pregnant. On side note, I don't know that I think that may be the first time I've mentioned that on the show, that my wife is pregnant. We're expecting our first in April. So I'm very excited. We did go to see Wreck-It Ralph, the Ralph Breaks the Internet recently.
As did I. Yes.
Oh my God. It was so amazing.
Oh, it's beautiful. And I'm not going to spoil anything specific, but the Disney princesses steal the show.
Oh, yes, absolutely. They did an amazing job. And I'm not ashamed to admit, I was crying quite soundly towards the end. The relationship between Ralph and Vanellope is amazing. And it would have been a much sweeter moment had the teenagers that were seated near us in the theater not been ugly crying so loudly that it was actually disruptive and humorous and undercut the complete sincerity of the moment. They were sobbing, like loudly crying at how touching the film was.
Wow.
And it actually kind of, my wife and I were sitting there laughing because we're laughing through tears because it was a very tender moment on screen. But then they were just like, oh my God, oh, that's so beautiful. Like it was sad to the point of being funny.
Okay, I definitely didn't have that experience at the theater we went to. I think everyone enjoyed it, but my goodness, that's quite a unique experience.
But I digress. Getting back to the Kingpin, he's in the Spider-Verse. He was also in the Daredevil Netflix series, which just got canceled. No!
That is ridiculous. I don't understand at this point what they're doing. And I'm saying this as someone that has given credit, blind credit, mind you, no pun intended, to Marvel and MCU and Netflix and Disney and all of the agencies that have made decisions on what's been happening over the past several years. I think they've done an excellent job. Why are you killing the goose that laid the golden eggs? I know several people that got into comics because they got into the show Daredevil because it was that well done. So for them to short-sightedly say maybe they have another plan for it on their own platform, hint, hint. I don't know if that's true or not. But the point being, I wouldn't take the risk of creating this gap because they haven't just done it with Daredevil. They did it with Iron Fist. Yay. Sorry. But they did it with Luke Cage, which sent me into a rage. I'm not going to lie. I couldn't believe it.
And then you've got Jessica Jones and the Punisher, and you know that they're going to release these seasons, and then that's going to be it.
Right.
Because the writing is on the wall at this point. It's doomed. They're doomed. There's no way if they canceled Daredevil, they're not going to say, oh, but we're going to keep Jessica Jones and the Punisher. It's not going to happen. So I don't know what the plan is moving forward with these characters and these shows. From what I understand, Netflix had the authority to cancel it and to be the one to pull the plug, not Marvel. So there was, I know, some speculation about Marvel saying, well, we're just going to pull the plug on them so we can put them on Disney Plus. That isn't the case because they're Netflix shows. They are licensed to Netflix, and it's going to be a similar situation to licensing characters to Fox. Netflix has the right to do with them what they want. And then once those options expire, then the rights revert back to Marvel. And eventually, I'm sure we will see them rebooted on the Disney Plus or put them into the MCU film proper wise. But until such time as that happens, I don't know. I don't envision them popping up in Avengers Endgame, which the trailer for that was just so beautiful.
Yes.
So beautiful in the sense that it was a true teaser. It just gives you slight glimpses of the film and then you're left to your own devices.
Well, don't worry. As we get closer to the film, you'll be able to piece together just about the entire plot by watching the 5 minutes of everything that they release. And we'll still enjoy it for sure. But I've noticed that happens over the years when it comes to trailers, original teaser followed by a little bit of exposition followed by, okay, here's the entire plot. If you haven't seen it by now, just go see the darn thing.
And it's funny because trailers in the 50s and 60s for movies were way more, will give entire plot points and scenes away than they are now. Trailers back then were about 5 minutes long and would just show entire scenes of films. And yet people still went, and they complain that trailers spoil things. You ain't seen the half of it. So the Kingpin, Wilson Fisk, created by Stan Lee, rest in peace, and John Romita Sr. in The Amazing Spider-Man number 50, July 1967. Wilson Fisk grew up as an obese child who was bullied for his weight until he started working out and took over a gang. He rose through the ranks to become a powerful crime lord, but he had a front as a legitimate businessman, which only gave him more power and access. He met a woman named Vanessa. They had a son named Richard who left the family when he found out what his father really did. He did walk away from crime for a while to appease Vanessa because when they met, she didn't know who he really was and what it was that he actually did. And so she said to him, I want you to leave the crime business.
So in other words, this is an alternative universe Sopranos.
I could see that. Yeah. There's something to be said there. I've never seen the show, but I know enough about it. Yeah, I know. I'm a bad Italian.
How is that even possible?
I didn't have HBO for the years that it was on.
Touché. Okay.
And I have so many other things that I have to catch up on right now. I don't have time for it. In any event, so he walked away from crime for a while, but he came back after Vanessa's apparent assassination by some rival gangsters. So although he started off battling Spider-Man, his greatest nemesis in comics these days is Daredevil. He's most closely associated with Matt Murdock at this point. So he hires Elektra and then Bullseye to go after Daredevil and discovers Daredevil's secret identity of Matt Murdock, because Karen Page was a pornographic actress who was addicted to heroin. It was a whole thing during the Born Again storyline because Frank Miller doesn't know how to write a female character who isn't a prostitute or otherwise overtly sexual in a demeaning fashion. Fisk uses his power to attack Matt personally and professionally, but he goes too far when Nuke kills dozens of people in Hell's Kitchen and gets arrested.
Yeah, that's the part that goes too far. You know, all of the underlying threats and veiled threats and all of that and wanting Daredevil to really suffer. Yeah, that didn't matter. Using a character called Nuke. What did you think the result was going to be?
I can't really argue with that logic. So he unwittingly partners with Hydra, who then steal his assets, and he's sort of left alone. He turns over information on Murdock to the FBI in exchange for freedom, but he and Murdock end up getting arrested together. During Civil War storyline, Fisk tries to roll on Captain America to Iron Man, but then he also betrays Tony, and then later he puts out a hit on Peter Parker after Peter famously revealed his identity as Spider-Man to the world. The bullet hits Aunt May, and then Peter beats 7 shades out of him in prison. It was glorious.
For once, I'm going to say that saying that he got whooped is an understatement. This is one of those stories, if you can pick up the comic itself and read it, I do think there is some level of satisfaction from anyone that has read any part of Spider-Man, because he doesn't get opportunities like this. And to see him take charge and really lay it on someone was quite refreshing.
Yeah, and he wants to kill Fisk because he's just so angry, but he opts to leave him alive because he feels that would be worse, knowing that Fisk was beaten by Spider-Man and that word got around that Fisk got beaten. So that reduces his power and authority. So Vanessa ends up dying, but her last wish is to have Matt Murdock represent Fisk. Matt gets all of the charges cleared against him, but he has to leave the country in exchange for all of this to happen. Then we move on to the Shadowland storyline.
Why do we have to pan this every time?
Because it still sucks.
Yeah, you're right.
So Kingpin helps Iron Fist and Luke Cage fight a demon-possessed Matt, but then later uses Lady Bullseye to recapture Shadowland after Matt is defeated, because it's revealed that Lady Bullseye and Typhoid Mary have been working for Fisk the whole time. I think in particular Typhoid Mary was a unknowing sleeper agent. He says a couple of words. One of them is shibboleth, which to me is just it's a fun word to say, and he triggers some memories that all of a sudden, oh no, I actually am working for Fisk at this point.
And you can find out more about Typhoid Mary in that particular episode for Capes on the Couch.
Yes. So then he's defeated by the superior Spider-Man, the Doc Ock mind in Spider-Man's body, which is just, I loved that run. That was just, it sounded so corny as a concept, but it was executed so perfectly that I really can't find any major flaws with it. So he was defeated by the superior Spider-Man and he fled to San Francisco, where Matt was working and publicly operated as Daredevil. And then he clashed once again with Matt. And then in the recent run by Charles Soule, he moves back to New York City and he advances himself as a write-in candidate for mayor. He wins the election and he uses his position to go after costume vigilantes, in particular Daredevil. So that's kind of where we are right now in the midst of that. Or at least as of I've read it, as of a couple of issues ago, Wilson Fisk was mayor. He was attacked by the Hand. Daredevil was trying to help, but all the costume vigilantes were arrested. You know, you've got Jessica Jones and Spider-Man and Luke Cage and Daredevil and Moon Knight and so on. Meanwhile, Matt Murdock, by virtue of I think being Wilson's chief of staff, was acting mayor, which is difficult because now Fisk is being operated on because he was literally skewered through numerous times by the Hand, and everyone's looking for Matt Murdock, but Daredevil is under arrest. So, you know, where's Matt Murdock? Where's the deputy mayor? Kudos to Charles Soule and the team for coming up with a very entertaining story. I read it because Moon Knight was in the books, but it ended up being a great story on its own merit. So
I'll admit I haven't had a chance to read it. From the description you just gave, my first thought is, how many times are we going to have a villain or even a hero take a political office? Because there are only so many things you can do with it. But I trust your taste in storylines, so I'll give it a look.
So moving on to the issues now, the first thing that I want to talk about, and it's something that's referenced a couple of times in the comics. It's referenced in the cartoon. I remember the fantastic 90s Spider-Man cartoon where he was, that to me, when I read Kingpin, or at least up until the Netflix series, I read it in the voice of that 90s Spider-Man cartoon, that basso profundo, that very deep resonant voice. But it's made reference, and we addressed it at the very beginning, his weight. He was a big boy, and he got comfortable with it, but his weight belies his strength, and he is incredibly strong and powerful underneath all of the, shall I say, corpulence. And I think he uses that to his advantage, but it's kind of a sore subject for him at times. So Doc, if you can address, you know, what led him to start working out and all of the issues with, I guess, body shaming, really fat shaming.
Yeah. Basically, we all have to have a certain image of ourselves in order to not take the extra mental energy to think about how we look from moment to moment. We know what we look like, quote unquote. And in general, we think that we look okay. Yes, there are things that we need to work on. That doesn't necessarily mean that they are absolutely terrible. We don't catastrophize about how we look. The problem is, especially during childhood and adolescence, we get exposed to children basically that are cruel. I don't mean that they're trying to be mean. I'm saying that they will make observations without consideration for how other people are going to take those comments, including other children who don't have the maturity to develop coping skills or recognize that impulsive statements don't have to be the be-all, end-all of their situation. So calling someone fat is different for a toddler, different for preteen, different for a teenager than is different for the elderly who probably have had so many experiences with people calling them different things. They're like, yeah, I am. So what of it? In other words, it rolls off of them. For people that are still trying to develop their whole identity, their physique is a part of that. So the idea that people are able to mold that view ahead of when they have their own perception can be incredibly damaging. It's referenced immediately with Kingpin because that's honestly what children do. And yes, you need guidance of adults and other people with more maturity to point out that it's not that way for intentional purposes and that this is not meant to be a permanent thing. But when you're developing your schema at a young age, it's very difficult to change. The good news is it can change at any point. So for someone like FISK who has physical capabilities, he notices that he's incredibly strong. So whatever people notice incidentally for the external factors, they became irrelevant to him, both because of his other attributes, his charm, his intelligence. He was able to foster that belief that if I do something different, I'm saying compensating, but it's beyond that. I can adapt and adjust my circumstances based on my own abilities to make something that's considered to be a flaw or something that's considered a negative and turn it into the absolute positive. Because there are plenty of examples where he comes across wearing his suits as just being this really big, obese gentleman. So you don't even get the idea that behind that is the strength of a powerlifter that can do a lot of damage if necessary. So he gets a secret weapon, basically. And that's the way he treats it for the positive. The downside to that is that he still carries the memories of his childhood where people only saw the negative and he didn't know how to address it or how to adapt to the social situation. And you can improve from previous experiences, but that doesn't mean they go away. So since no one is perfect, he will still have times where, especially heroes or other people that want to antagonize him, will make comments, and you could tell he doesn't let it roll off his back. He does get upset about it. He does get angry, and that reaction is not based on how he feels about his own physique, but how he felt about it when he was younger and the feedback that he got when he was younger. So in a way, I'm giving kudos to someone like FISK that is able to take negative feedback and in a way ignore it and develop a positive schema so that they're able to turn it into a secret weapon. On the other hand, he still would have to work on the intense anger from the previous experiences that he had as a child. So there's no such thing as anything being perfect, including him in terms of his emotions and in terms of his body. But I'll give credit where credit is due. He's a great example of someone that is not letting external, superficial commentary impact the actual productivity of his life, which doesn't just apply to fat. It applies to quote unquote ugly, to, quote unquote too young or too old. All of those types of comments that we get on social media all the time. And as you mentioned, the whole shaming thing. It's not just fat shaming or, pardon my language, but it's, or slut shaming or any kind of shaming. The idea that if someone genuinely wants you to improve a part of your life, fantastic, because they're concerned that the decisions you're making are going to have adverse consequences versus I simply want to antagonize you and make you feel worse about yourself. I don't think anybody could stand behind that.
No, I absolutely agree. That's something that no one is advocating. With respect to the prior fat shaming from when he was younger, I think that's certainly one of the driving courses or the driving reasons behind why he worked out and why he acquired the strength that he did. And I think you see that, frankly, in a lot of people that were maybe bullied when they were younger because of their weight or because of their body, that is the fuel that then drives them. You read all the time on the internet or you see stories about, I was a former fat kid. I used to be bullied over my weight and now I'm a power lifter. Now I'm an athlete. Now I'm this and that. And they use that anger that they felt to channel it into something positive. And that's a common trope. And I think Kingpin is another example of that. Someone who was bullied and took that fuel to give him reason to work out, to become stronger. He doesn't really lose the fat, but he gains the strength under it and the physical strength. And also, as you kind of alluded to, the emotional and the mental strength to be able to handle all of those things. And that in turn colors who he is in the present by virtue of what he went through in the past. So the next thing that I want to talk about is Kingpin as a villain, particularly post the Frank Miller run. He is a ruthless pragmatist. He acquires power because that's what he wants, and he will do it in whatever way he can. He doesn't care about the impact that it has on other people as long as it suits his ends. And this leaves him kind of alone, Vanessa aside. And even then, he gets Vanessa only by virtue of walking away from crime. He eventually comes back to it. Then she's dead. So now he's returned to a life of crime. This ruthless pragmatism, he values people only for utilitarian needs. And this leaves him, again, virtually alone. He's got a couple of people here and there. I think they did a fantastic job in the Netflix series with his one assistant, Wesley, James Wesley. And then, spoiler alert, he dies. So this has an impact that I think, resonates throughout the comics. Doc, if you can talk a little bit about what it is like to be so ruthless and aggressive that you push other people away.
In terms of hierarchy of needs, we always need the basics, food, shelter. But as you go higher on that scale, you need a purpose. You need to be productive. Congratulations to FISK. He's managed to create his own criminal empire. Later on, he's able to become mayor. This is despite being arrested for things. This is despite numerous superheroes coming after him with abilities beyond what he has. And it's all because he is singular of focus. When someone wants power and they're willing to exchange beyond the most basic of needs. And what I mean by that is when you're willing to exchange relationships, when you're willing to exchange quote unquote recreation, when you are willing to exchange most basic emotions because your goal is to be in a singular position of power, then unfortunately, history has indicated to us that if you have the other traits that we've already mentioned, he has the intelligence, at times he has the brute strength to have success with this, then there is a less than zero chance that you're actually going to achieve it. That, to me, is actually very scary because it means that you've done all of that to the detriment of the other needs. There's a reason why they're called needs as opposed to haphazard options. You need relationships. You need recreation. You need a hobby. You need, even if it's not something formal, you need your body and your mind to have the opportunity to reset and refresh, to come up with new ideas. Anyone that's ever been on a road trip, or not even a road trip, you're just in the car and you come up with something that you never thought of before. It wasn't because you said, while I'm driving, I am going to have this new idea that is going to change the world. No, it's because your brain is allowed to do different things at different times. And ironically, often the greatest points of inspiration, of creativity come when you are not focused on them, at least not directly focused on them. You don't.
Amen to that.
We both, I think, really relate to that. But the point being, someone like FISK, although he has come across as very intelligent, wouldn't even give himself the opportunity to do something like that, because why would you see that as something beneficial? Why would I try and come up with something that might be good for a certain subsection of society when I can just simply say, I'm the boss and everyone has to do what I say anyway? There's no quote unquote purpose to do that. You don't have to expend extra brain cells to think of something outside the box. You are the box and everyone has to fit in it. And when people don't, that in his case, as his criminal nature has shown, if you don't fit in the box and you're outside of it, that means you're dead. Philosophically, it can mean that they don't exist, in general life. But in his case, because of the power that he has, no, I'm getting rid of them. Or people that want to get outside the box, like, oh, I'll make sure you're outside the box. I'll make sure you don't exist. So it doesn't become just a metaphor, and it doesn't become something that's challengeable. No one can step to him because he is saying, I've already demonstrated the results. I'm the Kingpin. Why would I have to subjugate myself to anybody else's ideas or choices when it's very clear that what I do works? You don't have to reinvent the wheel. We've heard that saying time and time again. In his case, he's saying, I've had this wheel for as long as I can remember. And if you think that anybody else is going to make an improvement or adjustment or anything else, you've got another thing coming. So it's not just the idea that people don't want to be around him in those circumstances. He actively pushes them away. He's had the rare exceptions, which once again, I think points to the fact that it's a need as opposed to a want or a haphazard option when it comes to relationships. But because he is so overbearing, dominating with what he wants at all times, eventually, even the ones that are close to him are going to end up by the wayside. Fascinating.
I hadn't considered that. But I mean, and as we see in the comics, there are numerous situations where he does end up alone because he ends up, as you said, pushing people away, and then he ends up by the wayside. That happens time and time again. And I think it's only due to his strength of will that he continues to return to positions of power. And that's something we can discuss. I mean, there's a number of issues that Wilson Fisk has, and we could go for hours on him, but let's focus on just one more. I think this obsession with Daredevil that he has, and again, he started off as a Spider-Man foe, and he does occasionally return to Peter Parker, but his main focus is Matt Murdock. And I think that leaves him blindsided at times, and it's singular focus in a detrimental fashion. Not that singularity of focus is always a good thing in general, but I think in this particular instance, this obsession, particularly as we see in the Born Again storyline, it leaves him so blindsided to the possibility that something else could go wrong, that these externalities can have an impact on his plans and derail them. I think is an issue for him, and it certainly works out in favor of the heroes. But if you can expound on that a little bit.
Yeah, and I'm even going to go a little deeper with that, because I think it blinds him to, and by the way, I swear to you, we are not doing this intentionally, or maybe Anthony is, I don't know, but I'm not when it comes to the blind comments.
No, I'm not. I swear I'm not.
Yeah, but I think it blinds him to Matt Murdock at times as an asset. Because, and by the way, I am using that intentionally, saying that Matt Murdock is an asset versus liability, because Kingpin looks at things from that standpoint. Not, can this person help me? But depersonalizing. He says, can this be a benefit to my goal? So from that standpoint, to get back to that pragmatism a little bit, he wants to make sure that when he sees, based on his ranking of priorities, something or someone is a problem, that they need to be eliminated one way or another. That's fine. It's very good at times to focus on one goal and shoot for it. Just make sure that you're staying focused. Great. One little problem. There's something called SMART goals, and you can look up the acronym for it. The point being, often you need to break things down a little bit, piece by piece, in terms of the steps that you need to take to accomplish a goal. So with his obsession with Daredevil, it becomes a one-step goal. I need to either kill him or get him out of the picture somehow. Okay, great. So yeah, fine. Hire someone and try and get him, or, go after his family or whatever. It's like, That's incredibly short-sighted. Once again, not to use these puns with sight. My goodness, I don't think we're going to get around this.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's the nature of the beast.
Yeah,
and normally I'm all about the puns, but here I swear they're unintentional.
Right.
There's a lot of expressions involving sight. I apologize to any of our visually impaired listeners.
Right, but to get back to the point, he doesn't look at it from what is the consideration of the other person? Daredevil wants to stop me. I wonder why. Is it because my actions are causing harm? If they are causing harm, does that mean that my business is at risk? Because if one person has that complaint, magnify it out. Is that a representation of others? How are they processing it? If that is a problem, and it certainly is, then is there a way to mitigate this so that I'm not only quote unquote getting rid of Daredevil, but I'm eliminating the reason for people to act against me? So he doesn't think one step ahead, two steps ahead, which you would think for a supervillain would be their status quo. We're used to hearing these people have all sorts of backup plans and also, and he is a good schemer. I'm not going to deny that. But he takes the type of approach where he'll have a backup plan that is almost identical to his previous plan, just with different puppets, different actors. If this person didn't kill him, I'll get someone else to do it. If this person wasn't affected by what I said, then I'll just find someone similar. He's, ironically, I know I said before, don't reinvent the wheel. That's another example of it. Just go after the guy and everything else will take care of itself. It's actually a weird blind trust.
Wow, they're just coming fast and furious here.
This tells me, though, that, and I know you have this too, this tells me that our brains are very firmly wired to do this automatically. I'm not trying to come up with these puns, but they will not stop. I don't know what to say, folks. But the points still stand.
You can't turn a blind eye to him.
See, now that one was intentional.
That one was intentional.
Okay. But yes, that's the whole point. You hit it right on the head in the first place, that when you try and attack a goal, when you have an entire organization or your own personal life that you have to focus on, then you have to recognize this is all a juggling act in the world. And there are usually 3 or 4 balls at any given time. You decide you're going to grab one ball, the rest of them are falling down. Period. That's what Kingpin has decided to do. He does it on the positive, where he built up an empire, but he also makes sure that when he focuses on an enemy, he doesn't focus on any of the other threats and wonders why his empire crumbles.
Valid points. So moving on to treatment in universe, the poor mental health professional who attempts to treat Wilson Fisk in universe by virtue of all of the authority that he has and uses to his extent. But how would you treat him in universe?
This is incredibly risky, and I would not advise anyone to do this in real life, but I'd basically be running a covert operation. And what I mean by that is I would do my best to ingratiate myself to someone close to him, which we already know is purely on a utility level. It's not as if I'm saying I want a friend of Fisk. I want someone that he knows is important and them to be a friend to me. Then from there, I have access to him. Once I have access to him, I have to show my direct utility to him. So at the start, it might actually be one of those situations where I'm one of the most wanted men in the universe, because I would seemingly be improving his plans in terms of power, in terms of influence, in terms of his various machinations. Although I would not approve of his methods, the idea that he's able to be less myopic, the idea that he would be able to delegate appropriately so that his blind spots are covered. One of the best things you can do if you're worried about things you don't think about is to get someone close to you that doesn't think the way you do. So I would be that guy. From that point, I might be able to start changing a few things, pointing out, instead of trying to extort this particular president of this organization so that you get billions of dollars, what if you simply demonstrated that you have something in common with what you do on a weekend? I know it almost sounds like you're trying to be friendly, but even if you weren't capable of it, fake it till you make it. Giving those things as examples where he can still get the types of things he wants without doing harm to the rest of society. In other words, I can be utilitarian for good instead of being utilitarian for his evil. And I know that's not directly a mental health or psychiatric standpoint to take, but if I were in that position with him, imagine how many people within the organization I could influence. I could even point out, hey, I could do therapy sessions with some of your associates, some of your underlings. They can be better, right? And those people are probably way more malleable and way more receptive to the idea of therapy. And if you get enough people that show that they're improving, regardless of if they're doing it for Kingpin, he might actually demonstrate a change, if only to point out, dang, now I have actual evidence that my way is not the only way. This is a long shot, just saying.
Yeah, you're playing a long game here. This is many, many years of effort, and at any given point, any one of those cards could fall down and the entire house comes tumbling. So I don't envy you or whatever mental health professional would attempt to start that, but it could potentially work out. So moving into out of universe. Now here, I think we really have a rare opportunity because Kingpin is not that far-fetched of a character from a real person, which is one of the reasons why I think Vincent D'Onofrio's portrayal is so compelling. It's not just his charisma that D'Onofrio brings to the character. It's the notion that FISK is very real. He's very, very real.
Yep.
Even if some of the other characters around him are certainly fantastic and have these abilities and such, the notion that you have someone who is greedy and money and power driven and ruthless. I think we've seen, countless stories of mafia dons or businessmen that have these ambitions and that do these sorts of things. So this is not a situation where we're saying, well, I understand, like someone like, say, the Sentry, or many of the other characters that we're dealing with that have these fantastical powers that are very tied into their psyche. Wilson Fisk could be a real person.
Correct.
So what would you do in this regard out of universe to treat a real person that is very similar to a Wilson Fisk? How different would it be from your in-universe treatment?
The good news is I wouldn't have to do nearly the amount of espionage and dare I say, deceit that I would have to do in universe. Our real world, as you said, encounters many of these people, maybe not on that scale, but even if it were on that scale, they're still human beings. They're still relatable. So my thing is, once again, meet a person where they are. So if he wants power, if he wants to maintain control, if he wants to be in a position of strength within a large organization, that's fine. Many human beings do that, and they don't necessarily have to have any harm come to other people. They have influence over other people, but there's so many other techniques they could use besides just sheer intimidation and dominance. I actually have had experiences where I've recommended outside books that are not directly related to psychiatry. For example, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, Stephen Covey, one of the most famous books in the world. It gives you a great blueprint on how to have the most basic interactions with others, as well as how to organize your life so that everybody else can get the things that they want, so that ultimately you get what you want. And it's all meant to be a situation where a rising tide lifts all ships, as opposed to the idea that you have to battle them and take them all down. So that's a big change in mindset, but still producing the results that you want. Once you get to that point, that person is going to have different experiences that they may not have had before. What do you do now when people actually want to be around you? Not because you have the power, but because they notice you have other parts of your personality that seem nice or that seem interesting. you don't have to do it to charm other people. In other words, it develops a genuine interest in those around you, not just what they can be used for. That's a little scary often for people that are looking for positions of power because they're not used to interacting on that level. And then the therapist becomes the model for that and helps them develop from that point forward. If there's a situation where there's more emotion involved, because all of those things have been suppressed for an incredibly long period of time, because you don't have to put out anything other than showing you got your mean mug when you're the top dog. But if all of a sudden you don't have to show it and you're still getting the results that you want, those emotions start surfacing. You might need a little bit of guidance on that so that it doesn't become so overwhelming you end up impregnating the first woman that you see because you decide that that's the love of your life, even though you have no other evidence. But it's the first time you've felt that level of love in a long time. Once again, I'm skirting where this is an actual situation I've dealt with.
Oh, I was going to say this is definitely something that you've dealt with. You came up with that example far too quickly for it to just be happenstance.
And so from there, I basically have to give the person agency to feel that they can make, mistakes. See, often this comes with the air of perfection. People don't question you, usually because they're too intimidated to. But once you start opening up these floodgates again, people might actually start to notice some flaws, and the person themselves may notice the flaws. Scary stuff. In which case you have to build up a little bit, because underlying a lot of this, I know we didn't say the specific word. You can look at all of our previous episodes to find this many times, the narcissism that's involved. You end up with a narcissistic injury. You end up with a person that may be depressed. And you have to deal with that. This is all a wide range of possibilities for someone that was originally incredibly narrow focused. So I think we can do a lot of good with them, but I stand by my original point. First, get them to have interactions that are much more cooperative and productive while still meeting their goals. Once they see that that's possible, then you open up therapy for the rest.
Okay. All right. I see how that can certainly tie into some of the other characters that we've done. And I don't think he's that dissimilar in some respects. He's more, I guess, the negative side of the coin from a couple of the characters that we've done. You know, some of the more heroic types that dealt with those, you know, the narcissism of a Tony Stark or a Stephen Strange, et cetera. This is the downside to that. So I can certainly see how you would have to tread carefully with those issues until you develop a rapport and FISK has the capacity to understand, you know, who he is and what he's doing and that he can in fact make those mistakes. So now let's wrap this all up in a nice bow and see what happens when Kingpin gets on Dr. Issues' couch.
Hello, Mr. FISK. I'm Dr. Issues.
I know who you are.
Oh?
Yes, it's in my nature to do research on everyone I interact with. You have quite an impressive resume, highly respected in your field, and you come with a stunning list of recommendations.
Well, thank you. I don't do my job for the accolades, but it does feel nice to be appreciated.
And you're not just accomplished professionally, but you have a thriving personal life as well.
Yes.
A lovely wife and a beautiful daughter. She's about to turn 7, is it?
How did you...
As I said, I do my research. The thing about children at that age, they're so precocious, and yet they have such a consistent schedule. It's primarily school and a few activities. Their lives aren't yet filled with fluidity and drama, so the predictability offers some structure. The kind of structure that puts parents' mind at ease, knowing where your child is and what they're doing at all times. Of course, if things get thrown into chaos, that can be unsettling for both parent and child.
Yes. Good parents would do anything to protect their child.
I'm glad we're on the same page, Doctor. Now let's get to discussing my release from this facility.
But why would you want to get out of here? Seems like you have all the comforts of home. I mean, dare I say, you're safer in here than you are out in the real world. After all, only a fool would think to attack the Kingpin in prison. Unless there's someone else outside who you can't interact with, like, say, Vanessa?
How dare you say her name?
See, Mr. Fisk, I've done my research on you as well. I've read your file and I've spoken to some of your associates. I came in here fully prepared to listen to you threaten my family, and even though I knew it was coming, I still needed to hear the words out of your mouth.
Very well, Doctor. So you've read my file. What does it say about my interactions here with the staff, with other inmates?
Actually, it says you've been a model prisoner, if such a thing exists.
Have I any infractions of rules?
Is that why you have such a comfortable cell? Is that how you got the music playing?
It's soothing, isn't it? It's a very beautiful piece. Every time I hear it, I pick up something different. Some subtle change in the vibrations of the strings.
So they've allowed you these amenities. I'm sure it's for a good reason. And you still haven't explained to me why you would want to leave them behind.
Don't insult my intelligence, Doctor. I haven't done the same to you. Even the most gilded cage is still confining.
Then you also know under these circumstances that I want to know what your plan is when you're free.
I merely want to return to my businesses. I have heard reports of occurrences in my city that need addressing, not by costumed vigilantes, but by people who are willing to face the public directly and do what needs to be done.
I take it you're focused on people doing things the way you want them, rather by their own free hand?
Many people don't know what they truly need, Doctor. Chaos is everywhere. Structure and order, that is how people thrive. I can provide structure and order, but I am limited by my surroundings. Once I return to the public sphere, I can help reset the course of the neighborhood to one of prosperity.
Once again, I can understand you want to focus on your own prosperity, but I admit that I'm a bit disturbed that you see the relevance of structure and law in order to bring a benefit to others, but you're rebelling against a similar structure, specifically this law that had to be imposed upon yourself. That's why you're here. How are you going to be able to reconcile the two?
The beautiful thing about the law, Doctor, is that it can be changed.
But it can only be changed by people in positions of legitimate authority.
Yes, and the freedom of democracy allows anyone to seek those positions to offer their proposed solutions to problems of the populace.
I get it. I guess I shouldn't be surprised by your ambitions, but it sounds like you're using the types of connections that, dare I say, would lead to more corruption. I wouldn't focus so much on the population at large. Instead, focus on the psychiatrist in front of you. You want me to be able to say to you, hey, I think you're addressing your problems and you're well-intentioned. That means not implying things towards my wife and daughter, for example.
I respect your conviction to your profession. Surely you can appreciate that sometimes goals and intentions can come into conflict. From there, it is a battle of wills to determine who has the stronger vision for the future. I think you will find, Doctor, that my will is quite indomitable.
Well, based on your flexing this whole time, that seems to match your physical prowess. But in both spheres, it appears that what you're trying to do is brute force. I think some subtlety could be effective if you're willing to learn it. It might even help your personal relationships.
The problems we face, Doctor, require strength to solve them. It is better to ask forgiveness than permission, and so I will deal with the aftermath of my actions should the situation arise. Regardless, I must move quickly if there is any hope of saving my beloved city.
Wow, I assure you, the urgency is felt much more on your side. Anything that we do is going to have its own pace, and I must say, that pace is determined by myself and the staff here. So far, nothing you've said indicates that we should speed things up. If there's a particular problem from your own mental health standpoint that you wish to start addressing, that would be the only way we can move things along. You haven't convinced me you're at that point yet.
I have entertained you long enough. You will grant me my release, or otherwise your daughter...
And the proper authorities will deal with that level of threat the same way they've dealt with you directly. You know what? We're done here.
This isn't finished, Doctor.
Oh, and guys, can you kill his music? Get these paintings out of here.
Your pettiness will be your undoing.
Hey, just trying to save the system some money. I'm sure as a businessman, you can appreciate that.
Don't pretend your intentions are altruistic.
I'd say the same for you.
Are you okay? You seem a little shook.
Shook? I mean, I'm the one that's walking out in the free world while this guy now all of a sudden has no music, no entertainment, and basically gets to sleep in a cold cell at night. Not that I'm, wishing that on anybody.
Yeah, but I mean, he went after your wife and daughter.
Yeah, I mean... People can make threats, and that's why we have a system of law and order and doing everything we can to protect ourselves. And he's where he's supposed to be.
Okay. All right. You're taking this very well.
Well, I'll put it this way. If I were to totally flip out and become a vigilante and don a cape or a mask or, spandex and leotards, then we'd be having a much different discussion, wouldn't we?
This is very true. Then... I think that would make for a fascinating episode. Doc Issues, the superhero.
No.
How about Anthony Sitko, the superhero?
Only in your own mind.
Fine. The world already has a Moon Knight already. So.
Oh, my God.
So that's going to wrap it up for this week. Next week, we're going to cover Mr. Miracle, the DC New God superhero, and subject of an amazing, absolutely enthralling Eisner Award-winning run by Tom King and Mitch Gerads.
Shout out to Tom King, man. You're awesome, okay? I just wanted to make sure I said that.
And then we will take a short, 2-week break, 2-3-week break for the holidays, because Doc and I both have families that we need to tend to, and it's just going to be a lot easier for us to focus on them, and it's going to be difficult for us to try and squeeze an episode in. So we'll come back in January with some brand new episodes. I guess that'll be season 3 then, if you want to call it that.
I don't know. I mean, I almost think like it's a mid-season break or something.
Okay, yeah, that'll be the mid-season finale then, if you will, next week's episode on Mr. Miracle. But again, check out Considered and Conceited, the Aussie film review podcast. Also be sure to listen to Popcorn Psychology and their half of the crossover episode about the Incredible Hulk. And Doc, anything else you want to add before we leave?
Just make sure that the people that are trying to dominate your life don't. Period.
Wise words. So for Doc Issues, I'm Anthony Sitko. Thank you so much for listening. We'll see you next week.
Capes on the Couch podcast is for entertainment purposes only. Dr. Issues is a psychiatrist, but he is not your psychiatrist and does not have knowledge of your individual situation. For any personal mental health concerns, please consult your own healthcare providers. For medical emergencies, please call 911 or the designated number in your area immediately. Remember that you are not alone and help is out there.